Senator Ferdinand.
Thank you, Madam President. I want to add my voice to the contributions regarding this bill. I want to begin by recognizing or acknowledging some of the points raised by the Leader of Government Business when he introduced the bill, and say, yes, I totally agree that tourism is an important part of our national development. It is, and it's a very important part of our national development agenda. I also agree that St. Lucia has received the coveted title of Best Honeymoon Destination, and I note that the honorable member did not mention for the 10th time until we prompted him. For some reason, my learned colleagues tend to prefer to mention the things that are unprecedented and are historical and for the first time. But this time around, he failed to remind us that it was for the 10th time, which suggests that there must have been some kind of foundation laid for what we're enjoying today, and it must have been something that we've been working very hard as a nation over the last few decades to maintain. And so I urge us, all of us, especially those of us responsible for ensuring that the sector thrives, to continue to do that. Madam President, regarding this bill, I believe that it is important as we provide incentives for our tourists and our tourist industry to thrive, for our investors and business owners, hotel owners, to do business here and to improve the tourism product, that we try to create a bit of equity. We try to maintain a level playing field. I believe that all our local enterprises, our local business people, our local hotel owners, guest house owners, all persons who attempt or intend to be part of the providing a service for our visitors, for our tourists, including the larger hotel owners, everybody should receive or should feel that they are receiving a fair share of the pie. And so the incentives should be provided in such a way that it's fair and equitable. Not equal, but equitable. Madam President, while we discuss the benefits of these incentives to our larger investors, which I agree, we must not forget our homegrown local business people. And as stated correctly by our previous presenter, sometimes we fail to remember that our small business, maybe those persons who don't have the ability to build large hotels with hundreds of rooms, they also provide a very important service for our visitors, perhaps in their own space, in their own environment. And that our visitors judge our country by the experience that they have. And not all of these visitors stay in all-inclusive resorts. They move around the country and they look forward to enjoying what is truly St. Lucian. So I ask that as we move forward with these incentives, that we do not forget the importance of ensuring that everybody who aspires to provide that type of service receives similar types of incentives. Madam President, I know that sometimes it's very difficult for us to get a balance between what we do for the larger business owners and what we do for the smaller business owners. But in this highly competitive environment, sometimes you don't start off at the same level with your competitors. And so we must ensure that the incentives can allow for fair access to whatever is available, so that smaller business owners can remain competitive. Madam President, I want to mention that sometimes we also focus on providing these incentives with a view to allowing some of our more affluent and advantageous, if I put it this way, business owners to enjoy certain tax breaks and to be able to import stuff VAT-free. and provide incentives, exemptions on goods that are imported. But I think I want to caution that we must always ensure that this is done in accordance with the legislation and with the, for example, the Tourism Incentives Act. I also call for a bit of transparency in the process, and I think that was properly ventilated by the previous speaker. We must also be mindful that we must take a holistic approach to the tourism development in our country. No number of incentives alone will really help us achieve the objectives that we have for our country regarding the tourism product. So in light of the holistic approach, we shouldn't just pay attention to the incentives, but we should also pay attention to the other factors that contribute to a successful nation, a successful tourism product. And I'll just mention a few examples. We need to pay attention, and some of them have been mentioned before. We need to pay attention to the crime situation. We need to pay attention to the education of the citizenry. Because in some countries, you're not sure, well, in our country, you're not sure who a tourist will interact with, who they will meet along the way. And with all the tour guides and all those people we spend money on, it could very well be a student or an ordinary citizen who had, put forward an act of courtesy that left an impression on the mind of a visitor. And so it is a collective responsibility of the entire country to market our country. And so we must educate, we must sort to deliberately go on a drive to educate our citizenry through the formal education system and, of course, through other means to ensure that all of us know what our goal is for the country and how we should treat our visitors. Because sometimes all of the effort that is put in the Tourism Authority with the Ministry of Tourism, it's undone because of the actions of one irresponsible, or if we can say uneducated or insensitive St. Lucian. And so we must ensure that we take a holistic approach and we pay attention to the little things that our citizens need to know so that when they interact with these tourists, they are all ambassadors of the country. When I go to places like Barbados, Madam President, when you meet a Bajan, everything in Barbados is perfect and beautiful. They're so proud of talking about their country. And I'm not saying that St. Lucians don't do it, but we must, and it didn't happen just so, Madam President. The Bajans didn't just get up and be proud. They didn't just get up, and grow up that way. There are certain things that are being done in the education system, in the way they are socialized, that causes them to have that kind of output. And so we as St. Lucians, especially now that we're talking about our 40th anniversary of independence, we have to seek to do that. And we have to seek to even formalize some of our practices. Even in our curriculum, we can insert some of these areas. The social studies, for example. Sometimes you look and you don't see anything happening in the schools during this time. You don't see anything deliberate taking place to ensure that our young people have appreciation for how we treat visitors and for how we treat each other. So I'm saying the holistic approach needs to be taken. Madam President, I also believe we should pay attention to, I mentioned education and crime, but I also think we should pay attention to our health services. Because we want to ensure that our visitors, if we put so much effort into incentives to bring them here, and I remembered my learned friend, the Honorable Leader of Government Business, spoke about bring them in, and when we bring them in, then they will be able to spend and so on. But when we bring them here, we must be careful that if something goes wrong, we have the services that are available. The healthcare is one concern. Our largest airport is Urundoro International Airport in the south of the country. And very close to it is this George Odlum Stadium. And that may be the first contact point for tourists who has just arrived to a health service. And that may be the impression that is left on the mind of that tourist when they return to their country. The quality of care that they receive. Perhaps they developed an allergy or something and they had to quickly go by, stop by the stadium for treatment. So we must pay attention to these things. So healthcare is not a part or cannot be taken in isolation to the development of our tourism product. Madam President, I also think that we should pay attention to preservation of our historical sites and our patrimony. We need to pay attention to the things that make us St. Lucian. Because sometimes we are busy trying to impress the tourists with all those things, and the things they come here for are the things that we are not paying attention to, are the things that we are destroying. So, Madam President, when I speak of the holistic approach, all of these things are important. Another one I want to raise, or I want to mention, Madam President, is, well, it comes under the environment, but we just have to pay attention to how we treat our environment generally. Our physical environment and the social environment, the way we interact. Sometimes when we speak of the environment, it's always about the beaches, the sea, and so on. But our social environment is a key factor that affects the way people see us, the way we relate to each other, the way we speak to people, the way we treat each other. So that's important. I also believe, Madam President, that our cultural practices need to be preserved. What distinguishes St. Lucia from other similar tourism destinations in the region is our way of life. And we spend money to bring people here, but we have to pay attention to what we do, what they see when they come here. We need to create a balance, Madam President, between the development of the tourism sector and the preservation of what we call our St. Lucianness. And what a better time for us to do that than as we approach our 40th anniversary of independence. Madam President, earlier on when we heard a statement regarding, I think it was from the minister responsible in the Ministry of Tourism responsible for for culture, is it? Correct. When she made the point, and I agree with it, that we should, the frequency of awards, I think it was, no, it was not her, it was the leader of government business. The frequency of awards needs to be increased, and I agreed. When I spoke about it, I agreed. But, Madam President, when we do that, we are demonstrating that our people, our citizenry, is made up of people who can do stuff, good people, competent people, ambitious people. St. Lucians, we are ambitious and good people. And so if we are that good and that ambitious, give us the very same incentives that you give to the other business people, to the international business people, to the foreign investors. They are local investors who have ambition, and they are proud St. Lucians, and they want to develop themselves and their country. So we must offer them these incentives too. And that is why I began by saying that it must be equitable. It must be for both our international and foreign investors and business people, as well as our small local business people. Madam President, I want to wrap up because I think a lot has been said on this issue. So I want to just remind the House that as we deal with this bill, that whatever we do, whatever incentives we provide, should not just be about making the books look good and saying that we were able to provide so much for these investors and these business people. It must be done by paying attention to the other factors that may threaten the very existence of the tourism product that we are trying to incentivize. Because, as I said earlier, no matter how many incentives you provide for hotels and for other business people to import goods and so on, very nice. But if you don't pay attention to the other issues that can threaten that very industry, it would be a lot of waste. So we'll be well advised to spend some time and spend some money and perhaps provide some incentives for the things or the issues that can threaten that industry. And just to remind us what they are, from those that I pointed out, let us pay attention to crime and reduction of crime. In general, let us pay attention to increased education, deliberate increased education and policies that increase the education of our nation regarding how they treat themselves and visitors. Let us put more emphasis and provide incentives for an improved health service. Let us provide incentives for improved preservation of our natural resources and our natural, the nature reserves, and the things that make us, or that we have to preserve to keep our country looking like a very unique and special destination. The things that other countries do not have that we have. We must deliberately put policies in place to protect those. And also, Madam President, we need to ensure that we preserve our culture and our heritage so that when we are providing incentives and we bring these tourists here and they come to our country and observe our way of life, they observe the way we interact with each other, the way we interact with them, they will return because they would have had a unique experience in this country, because they would not have seen that anywhere else. And so I end by saying, yes, we should give incentives. Let us give it equitably to both local business people and foreign business people. And let us also pay attention to the other issues that affect or that may threaten the existence of the tourism product that we are trying to promote. Thank you, Madam President.